Welcome to part 3 of the motorcycle tank tutorials. I'm Alex Popov, and in this video we'll be defining the outer edges of our side surfaces by creating curves, projecting those curves onto the surfaces, and then trimming to our curves on surface. We'll also build the underside surfaces for our tank. I'm going to use degree 5 edit point curves to define the shoulder line for this tank. Really just trying to work out where the top and side surfaces would intersect, and I'll use this sort of highlight here as reference to where I believe that point will be. So put the first curve down, degree 5 edit point curve, select the CVs and move them into position. When placing the curves, you want to kind of break up your overall shape, so not any one curve is doing too much work. These trimmed edges will build our top surfaces from, and again, you don't want any one surface to be doing too much work. As you can see here, my curve network is broken up into manageable sections. I'll select individual CVs and move them roughly into position so that they reflect the shape of the tank. For the tighter corners, I'm going to use a degree 5 edit point curve, hold Control and click next to the CV you want to snap to, and they'll snap to position. And to clear the view up a little bit, I'm going to put my surfaces onto an invisible layer. I will now align with G2 continuity these curves here and here, as well as the other side. For the purposes of this video, with speed and time in mind, I'm just going to show you how to construct these top few curves we've been working on. However, for the remaining curves, the workflow is exactly the same, so just mirror what you've done here. I'll analyze the curves with the curve curvature locator, and then we'll improve the combs using the transform CV tool. The comb is telling us we've got G2 continuity between our curves. However, we can use the transform CV tool to get closer to G3. We can also try and get a more uniform crown on our comb for our aligned curves. Because of the alignment history on our smaller curve, playing with a G1 and G2 CVs on the parent curve will give us a smoother crown to our comb for the aligned curve, as you can see here. I can also play with the G2 CVs on the aligned curve, pulling them close together. We'll get a tighter peak on our comb. Playing with the G1 on the parent curve helps the lead in. So you can see we're getting closer to G3 continuity. Same again on this side. Increase the lead in by transforming the CVs on our parent curves and improve the uniformity of our comb. There we go. So you can see we're edging closer and closer to G3 continuity. I can also move the end CVs if I'm struggling to obtain G3. The reason for doing all this work is because these curves are going to make our trimmed edges that we're going to build our top surfaces from. It will make obtaining G2 or even G3 continuity along our top surface boundaries far easier. So I'll jump forward and you should end up with a curve set that looks something like this. And you can apply the curve curvature locators, and when we scale that down to a readable size, you can see that it's all nice and smooth and nice and uniform. Again, this was done using exactly the same workflow as I've just shown you. So now we're ready to move on to the underside of the tank. Rather than building the underside surfaces from the trimmed edges of our side surfaces, I'll show you a different workflow where we build planes and intersect our planes with our side surfaces. So planes are considered simple surfaces. You can find them in the surface section of the palette, just here. I'll just quickly toggle my grid back on and snap my plane to the grid by holding Alt. And then I'll set the pivot, Control Alt click, and snap the pivot to here. Jumping to side view, I can hold Control and move my plane, snapping to that CV there. I'll then scale the plane to where the underside of the tank remains flat, so about there. In top view, you'll see my layer's got symmetry on, which isn't an issue at the moment. What I want to do now is set the pivot, as we did last time, and snap to the grid, constraining to the Y direction. I'll then non-proportional scale my plane outboard so that it's intersecting with the side surfaces. For the front section of the underside of our tank, we'll copy and paste the plane we've just made and move it into position. Firstly, we'll snap the pivot to this edge and holding Control will snap to that CV. I can now move to top view and position my plane snapping to the grid using Alt, but constraining to the Y direction so that I don't change the height of the plane. Holding the middle mouse button, I'll scale non-proportionally this plane to where the underside surface of our tank remains flat. With the front and rear sections for the underside of our tank in place, we can now move on to this S-bend section here. So again, we will duplicate our plane by copying and pasting. We know the pivot's in the correct position, so we can scale it non-proportionally by holding the middle mouse button and move it into position. This time we will rotate. Remember to constrain to the correct axis when you're rotating, and scale a little bit more. There we are. With the main flat surfaces in position, we can now create these curved blend surfaces that will form the S-bend in the underside of our tank. To do that, there are many different ways, but this particular workflow is very quick and very easy, and it utilizes the skin tool. So I'm going to skin, and we only hold positional continuity at our surface boundaries. So I will change the degree in the V direction for the surfaces to degree 5, and we only want degree 1 in the U direction, as shown here. We're now able to align our surfaces with G2 continuity. As I say, this is just one way of many to create these blend surfaces. You could have used the freeform blend tool. You could have created construction curves, aligned and squared surfaces, but this is an easy way to do it. So I'll unhide the side surfaces, and we're ready to perform our intersection to create some curves on surface. I've just hidden my canvas layer in my grid. Now the intersect tool can be found in the palette here in Surface Edit under the project option. First of all, select your main 3 side surfaces and then hit spacebar, and then be very careful just to click once and once only on the underside surfaces. If you click more than once, you'll duplicate your curves on surface, which is not good. Now go back and select the project tool instead of intersect, and select our surfaces, hit spacebar, select the curves, hit spacebar again, and we'll have some curves on surface we can trim to. So now with the trim tool selected, we want to keep the sections of the tank like so. Hide the locators, hide the CVs on the curves, hide the curves in fact, and apply some symmetry to the side layer. Finally, delete the surface history for our surfaces, and that's a good place to leave this video. So thanks very much for watching. Hope you found it useful. See you in the next tutorial.